These events occurred several years ago, prior to the commencement of the reconstruction of the Waldorf Hotel. The elegant vestibule extended from Park Avenue to Lexington Avenue, with a large clock situated at its center. The clock was decorated with intricate detailing and gilding, and surmounted by a depiction of the Statue of Liberty. It is probable that these features remain in situ. The landmark is an ideal location to commence celebrations marking a wedding anniversary. Robert Jones, an experienced editor of a well-known newspaper, was present at the scene. The renowned journalist hastened down the avenue, navigating the whirling snowflakes, to meet his spouse of 25 years, a thriving marketing manager. They were a paragon of reliability, esteem, autonomy, and devotion to one another. Robert was a gracefully aging, prosperous gentleman whose allure and perspicacity made him invaluable in the principal news division and the driving force behind numerous successful endeavors. Marketing campaigns in the cosmetics industry. Charming herself and known for not suffering fools regardless of their race, creed, or gender. Robert reached into his pocket, having done so on numerous occasions while rushing here. Christmas coincided with their 25th wedding anniversary. A long, thin box contained a diamond necklace he had made for her with 25 stones, tracing his love for her with precious gems he had secretly saved money for several years to afford. Robert was able to afford this gift. He had a fondness for beautiful words, so the box bore an intricate inscription, "Our Love and Diamonds." The gift was quite extravagant. 25 years was a significant milestone, and Christmas was always special for them. They had met at a Christmas Eve party and held a date party every year in honor of this wonderful holiday. Due to the snow, the night felt special, and he felt his excitement growing as he hurried to his beloved woman. A Salvation Army brass quartet was positioned near Central Station, and he proceeded to cross the street to make a donation. This action caused him to experience a delay, but he was unable to resist the urge. It was Christmas Eve, and he was inspired by the Christmas spirit. He felt that there had been periods of hardship in their relationship and that they were gradually becoming distant from one another. Anne's professional advancement in her company had placed upon her a greater number of responsibilities, as well as a new necessity for travel. Robert led a group of young reporters, who were brimming with energy. However, with minimal experience and the potential for his beloved newspaper to become embroiled in legal disputes if not carefully managed, they had begun to interact less frequently. Robert was concerned that they were becoming accustomed to this reduced contact and suggested that they not prioritize holidays and instead identify shared activities, potentially including him, but not exclusively. He hoped to capture Anne's attention and encourage her to shift her focus from her current pursuits to engage with him in a renewed sense of connection. Robert was confident that Anne would never deceive him. Their relationship had always been strong, and he trusted her. Robert never considered asking if Anne was happy with their relationship. He assumed that things should be taken for granted. Wasn't that what trust meant? Robert carried flowers in his hands and hummed a Christmas tune as he walked with a spring in his step. He was eager to embrace Anne and whisk her away into the magical night. On that night, Robert had planned a special surprise for his wife. As he was walking home, he noticed a few men exiting a bar and standing by the clock. He was happy to see that his wife was not late, unlike Robert, who was always late. One of the men approached his wife and gave her a tight embrace, kissing her gently on the lips. In her confusion, she instinctively responded to his kiss. "Mike, darling, what are you doing here?" she asked. Realizing that her husband could appear at any moment and visibly flustered, she pulled away, but it was too late. Robert had already seen what had transpired. He paused and stepped back to observe the subsequent developments, his demeanor still visibly nervous. "I'm in town for a brief meeting and then flying out of Kennedy Airport to London on the first flight in the morning. Are you available for love tonight?" Your husband, without even realizing it, Robert slowly approached them. As he listened, growing increasingly anxious, he wondered who this man was and what he was to her. He could see the wrapped gift in her hands and wondered if it was for him or for this stranger and their obvious love kiss in such a public place. Robert Jones introduced himself, and Anne's face froze, her gaze flicking between her lover and her husband. "I see you know my wife," Bill Johnson replied, stammering. Bill looked helplessly at the ground, unsure of what he was supposed to say. Robert observed that the timing of their encounter was unfortunate. He suggested that they might have an opportunity to converse further at the hotel, where there were numerous rooms available for guests. He then excused himself, indicating that he would contact them later. Robert was visibly distressed. He reached into his pocket, attempting to retrieve his phone, but instead produced the gift box. He began to unwrap it, his hands trembling. He then proceeded to unwrap her own gift, his movements indicating his uncertainty about how to proceed. Robert then turned his attention to the gift box. He gazed at it for a moment, his eyes reflecting his distress. The man's eyes were rimmed with tears as he turned away, thrusting a necklace into her hands behind him. From behind, he could hear angry words being exchanged. He ceased paying attention to the exchange, and instead began to walk away. He needed to leave in order to get away from the situation. He was bewildered by how things had come to this. He was consumed with the realization that he had missed important developments in his work due to his preoccupation with other matters. He was shocked and dismayed to discover that she had betrayed him in such a way. Robert was calling out to him, but he was already as he reached the top step of the staircase. Her voice grew closer, but he was already at the exit. A taxi was waiting, and he quickly got into it. Robert gave the address and disappeared, watching as the taxi merged into the stream of cars, a single taxi in a sea of vehicles. It seemed hopeless to find her. Robert was never supposed to know, she had been so careful. How could she have done such a thing? How could she have run into Bill? How could he have been so stupid and reckless in his approach? Her actions, which were carried out in full view of others, caused irreparable damage to the situation. It was unclear whether Bill was aware of the full extent of the situation, but he finally caught up with her. He inquired as to her well-being and expressed concern. However, she conveyed that she held him responsible for the circumstances that had transpired. Her demeanor indicated that she held him accountable for his actions, which were carried out in a public setting where others could observe. She questioned his right to treat her in such a manner. She simply greeted him and moved on. This was a disaster. Robert was devastated. She would have to change her schedule to find time for her husband. She would talk to Robert and explain why they had to overcome this unpleasant situation. She then thought of what she would say to bring Robert back to his senses. It was a good plan, and she saw no reason why it wouldn't work. Robert looked out of the taxi window at the passing lights. What had he missed? When had it happened? She had managed to drift so far away. Was he angry? He felt that way, but if so, why didn't he scream and punch that bastard instead? He was alone, running away from his beloved wife, lost in mutual accusations, silent, and trying not to cry. Whatever he felt, it was much more than anger. For the first time in his memory, Robert Jones didn't know what to do. He felt blinded, abandoned, and betrayed. When he returned home, Robert wasn't there, and it wasn't surprising. She changed clothes and dragged a chair from the living room to the hallway, settling in to wait for her husband's return. She awoke at sunrise to find that he had not come home, leaving her alone. It was Saturday, which meant that he must have rented a room. He would be home today. She suppressed the urge to call him on his mobile, recognizing that he needed time to calm down. She believed that, when he regained his composure, they would be able to resolve the situation by noon. By 3 p.m., however, she was becoming increasingly nervous. At 10 a.m., she was in a state of acute distress and contacted him via his mobile phone at his place of employment, at the gym, and at 2 bars that he frequented. She was aware that he associated with several of his acquaintances, including half a dozen friends and his mother, with whom she had a contentious relationship. By Sunday, she had contacted the New York Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the State Police, and numerous other law enforcement agencies. She also retained the services of a private detective. Her rationale for these actions was that her husband was missing and she was driven by a desperate need to locate him. She believed that venturing into the city and searching for Robert herself might prove beneficial. Her search for Robert, which had initially commenced with a trip to the shops, soon became a daunting endeavor. As she sought assistance from her sister Beth, her family came to recognize the gravity of the situation. By Sunday, her 2 sisters and their husbands, her children, her parents, her mother's sister Beverly, his mother, some of Robert's oldest friends and her immediate colleagues from work had gathered in the dining room. They listened to the detective's account of the disappearances, which were not uncommon during the holidays, particularly during Christmas. There was no reason to believe that this was anything out of the ordinary. The detective was unable to ascertain whether an accident had occurred or whether Robert was injured. He experienced a strong emotional shock as a result of this remark, which prompted several sharp glances in his direction from those present. Based on everything the detective had heard, Robert was a sensible guy. They should give him a chance to resurface and see what he has to say. The detective became increasingly angry, shouting that this was not the full picture. They were not going to wait and see if Robert's body floated in the river. The detective needed to put aside his other cases, do his job, and find her husband. He was frustrated and wanted to scream at them. She needed her husband. She needed to. It would be beneficial to engage in a discussion with him to elucidate the rationale behind her actions. It would be advantageous to ascertain whether he would be able to comprehend her rationale, grant her forgiveness, and forgive herself. The detective provided appropriate counsel and subsequently departed. However, there were few additional measures he could have taken. This was a matter that fell within the purview of Anne, and it was her responsibility to address it. His departure marked the beginning of a heated dispute. The attendees asserted that they were acquainted with individuals who could facilitate a resolution, yet they chose to conceal themselves behind their mobile phones. Anne's brother, meanwhile, led the chorus of criticism directed at the police, claiming that they had not done enough to assist the investigation. Both mothers expressed their sympathies with the misfortune that had befallen their families. However, they also conveyed a sense of powerlessness and fear about what might happen next. They also expressed disdain for Anne's sisters. Beth then made the announcement that the Christmas dinner was cancelled. She explained that she wanted the family to give each other some space until Robert was found. As the voices grew louder and fell silent, her anger was Beth's announcement left her feeling both exhausted and gripped by fear. She was suddenly aware that she lacked the ability to speak in this room. How could she possibly respond to people who cared about her husband more than she did? She had finally learned what it meant to be truly alone. Eventually, everyone left. She went up to her bedroom to change her dress. Friday evening's events were still fresh in her mind. She picked up the dress she had worn on Friday evening and saw the gift box. What were Robert's last words? She did not want to think about the last part. What did he say as he left? Whatever happens, this is for you. She picked up the gift and read the note. She opened the box and removed the necklace, which sparkled in the light. She took it with a trembling hand. She fainted and fell to the floor, still holding the necklace. There were 3 days remaining until Christmas, and her husband was still missing. The police department in the city had dormitories where they could eat and sleep during long shifts. Journalists were aware of these facilities and had friends who would allow them to stay for a few nights when they could not or did not want to return home. Robert had utilized these accommodations on more than one occasion in the past. The office was a 30-minute walk away. A brief excursion to a nearby men's clothing store revealed that Robert was still attired in the same garments he had worn 3 nights prior. He promptly procured a razor and shaving cream. Despite the challenging circumstances, he was compelled to fulfill his duties. The newspaper's printing deadlines remained unyielding. He accessed his voicemail to review messages and convened with colleagues at 9 a.m. She met with the appropriate individuals until noon and spent the afternoon developing an article on sea level rise. The newspaper operated in a manner similar to that of other effective bureaucracies. If one was unaware of the exact contact information for a desired individual, there was no straightforward method of reaching them. She attempted to contact him but was unsuccessful. What could be said about that? For Anne, she was anxious. Her father was inclined to instruct her to return home, but that would likely exacerbate the situation. Her team conducted a thorough search. She enlisted the entire department staff to serve as a personal detective agency, scouring hotels, motels, and other lodging options from Boston to Washington. When confronted with resistance from senior management, she remained undeterred, even venting her frustration by suggesting they search under bridges. Holly, the senior graphic artist, eventually solved the mystery. Her father had served in the NYPD, and she realized that the police have places where they can rest. She stated that within 20 minutes, she had compiled a list of addresses and phone numbers, each of which she had obtained within 2 minutes. Upon confirming the address where Robert was staying, she promptly proceeded to that location. Robert reported feeling an improvement in his condition. The duty sergeant had assured him that he could remain at the facility for as long as he desired, and work appeared to be proceeding smoothly on that beautiful, cold, and clear morning. Robert proceeded to take a walk and stood in his path, no more than 50 feet ahead. Robert had been searching for her everywhere, and she had found him. He suddenly felt detached, as if he were watching himself speak from the outside. He wondered whether he should be more emotional. He was experiencing something inside him, but he was unsure of what it was. He could see with surprising clarity, but despite how acutely he was aware of Anne's presence, Robert felt dead inside. He then considered that he should be more upset, but he wasn't. He had lost all feeling. "Please, Robert. Let me elucidate. I did not intend to cause you pain. I did not desire for you to discover the manner in which you did. Nevertheless, what can be said that you engage in extramarital relationships now? I am aware that you concealed this from me. I am aware that you were discovered fortuitously. I was present when this occurred. I do not wish to hear the particulars or any trivial anecdotes. I am aware that this was merely sexual and that it held no significance for us. What can you truly say?" Robert felt himself slipping away and moved towards him. In an effort to bridge the emotional distance between them, she hoped to discuss the matter publicly. However, she was reluctant to do so in such a public setting. She had discovered the truth in a hotel lobby, a place that was arguably more public than necessary. If she had something to say, she suggested, it should be said now. This prompted her to reconsider her approach. She realized that she could not simply lull Robert into a false sense of normalcy and then wear him down. Instead, she decided to take a different tack. She began by expressing her love for Robert. She said, "Robert, let's talk. I love you, sir, so much. I've always loved you. However, I began to experience a sense of restlessness. I was uncertain as to the cause and, moreover, unsure of how to convey my feelings to you, as I was unable to comprehend the nature of my own emotions. Following my promotion, I spent a considerable amount of time traveling, which afforded me the opportunity to interact with numerous men. On occasion, they paid me attention, and I came to realize that I found their interest flattering. What distinguished these interactions from those I had experienced previously was that the attention was new and, as a result, felt different. I was no longer restless, I was excited to be appreciated as a woman. I felt this was something I needed and, as a result, I was unable to discuss the matter with you. To provide me with such a gift, would you have granted me permission to do so? We have been together for a considerable length of time, and it would not have been equitable to do so. You could have informed me of these circumstances at any point. When my wife receives compliments, do you truly believe that I would be surprised or envious? There was something else, was there not? You engaged in sexual intercourse with another individual. No further details are necessary, a simple yes or no will suffice." She then looked down and hesitated. To her credit, she met her husband's gaze and stated, "Here we are." However, it is unclear why or how we arrived at this point in the narrative. I am unable to identify the specific action or series of actions that resulted in the loss of your trust and confidence in me. However, it is evident that I erred significantly in my conduct or decision-making. Robert, in a state of distress, uttered the words he was about to say goodbye. Was this an act of conscious volition, or was it an involuntary response to circumstances beyond his control? He was accompanied by his wife's lover at the hotel, which may have influenced his actions. The words themselves seemed to emerge from his mouth, as if he were a mere observer of his own actions. Robert came to recognize that he proceeded to walk past his wife and continue on his own way, remaining in a state of shock as he attempted to process the recent events. He was aware that the encounter had been sexual in nature and that it had provided a degree of excitement. However, he was certain that it did not signify a long-term commitment. He was the sole object of her affections and had previously provided her with a detailed explanation regarding the situation. He was perplexed by his inability to comprehend this information and to accept her account. He was also uncertain as to why she had not been able to convince him of the truth of her statements. He was particularly struck by the contrast between the relatively short distances typically traversed on the east-west streets of Manhattan and the considerably longer distances typically covered on the north-south streets. As a native New Yorker, he was accustomed to navigating the city with ease. However, on this occasion, he found himself lost on his return to his office. She continued to search for familiar landmarks, attempting to orient herself, but her attention was elsewhere. She found herself repeating Robert's words, questioning whether he truly meant all that he said. The discomfort of her feet and the chill of the air contributed to her distraction, as did the persistent ringing of her phone, which she had turned off. She noticed a coffee shop and managed to find a free seat. Robert's anger and sadness were evident, yet he had not provided any specifics. He had not demanded details about the number of men involved, nor had he inquired about their relative merits as lovers. Were they more skilled in bed? Was that what Robert wanted? To know the words she could potentially use to deflect his accusations, she considered the various reasons Robert might have for his behavior. The mere fact that she had concealed her actions was sufficient to elicit a negative response from him. Had she misjudged his character? Was Robert truly as vulnerable as she had assumed? Why hadn't he challenged her or asserted his rights? It later occurred to her that she had been hasty in her actions, and she recognized the potential consequences of her actions. She had broken her husband's heart because she had not believed he would listen to her and had not given him the opportunity to respond. The opportunity to discuss your desires was never provided. You did not inform Robert of your intentions to alter your behavior. You did not offer him a chance to identify potential solutions that could benefit both of you. Given your previous lack of trust, it is understandable why Robert would be reluctant to believe you now. However, the truth is that you were afraid of his rejection. Even if he did reject you, you would still engage in infidelity. You did not love Robert enough to be honest with him and face the consequences. You prioritized your lover and yourself over your relationship with Robert. You lied. She betrayed him for sexual gratification and is now unable to live with her actions. Self-deception is a destructive force. If the truth is revealed at the wrong time, it can be even more damaging. Her conversation with Robert was a misstep, resulting in further complications. She picked up the phone but then slowly put it down. Robert was correct, she had nothing to say to him or anyone else. She had destroyed everything. Christmas came and went, and Beth softened. The family gathered on Christmas. Eve was invited to a feast and gift exchange, but she knew it would be preferable for her to decline. It was evident that she was not wanted at the event. Several weeks later, she was engaged in a lengthy conference call when her father contacted her to inform her that she needed to take an emergency call. Robert was in a psychiatric ward for observation after attempting suicide. He had missed 2 days of work, and the police were called because Robert was found with a loaded gun and a suicide note. She was asked if she would come to the emergency room. She was listed as the emergency contact in Robert's office, and she was already on her way when her colleagues provided Robert's room number and the doctor's name. As the emergency contact in his office, she was already en route when her colleagues provided Robert's room number and the doctor's name. Upon her arrival, she had composed herself and demanded to see her husband and his doctors immediately. At the meeting, there were 2 doctors, both certified in psychiatry. One was the author of a respected textbook, and the other was the principal investigator leading a national study on depression and suicide in Middle. The doctors informed her that her husband was in a state of clinical depression, had developed a suicide plan, and had taken steps to obtain a weapon. They stated that he posed a clear danger to himself and, potentially, to others. They explained that they were taking him off heavy medication in hopes of giving him a chance to regain his strength. They noted that whatever had brought him to this state was a shock, but that he was not forthcoming about it. We were hoping you could provide us with further information regarding the precipitating event. We constructed a narrative that, while perhaps not entirely coherent, was intended to assist the doctors in formulating a diagnosis. However, their subsequent notes and discussions did not yield any insights. It was evident that Robert required psychological support. I was seeking an opportunity to speak with my husband. We were amenable to allowing you to see your husband, but only under the condition that it be conducted through a 2. At this juncture, it is imperative that we refrain from any action that might exacerbate Robert's condition. Regrettably, this may entail a meeting with you. Might I inquire as to whether there was a bruise on one side of his face? He had not shaved in weeks, and his hair was even unkempt. Had he ever washed the hospital gown, which revealed his scrawny legs? He appeared to be old, abandoned, homeless, and unkempt. His hands were in handcuffs, and his head was moving from side to side. He was muttering something under his breath, though she could not discern the words. What was he doing with his fingers? The attending doctor did not intervene as she moved closer to the glass. His fingers were extended, though it was unclear if he was pointing at something, perhaps the ceiling or walls. It seemed as though Robert sensed her presence and began shouting louder. Was he shouting her name? It appeared so, and that he was mimicking shooting himself in the head. Was he still attempting to end his life? She left without saying a word, realizing for the first time what she had done and understanding what she needed to do. Visiting hours ended at 8, the time was 10 p.m. At 7:30, a family even arrived in a vehicle, comprising a mother and daughter who were visiting their husband and father. The security check was perfunctory, while the guard was otherwise engaged. The mother handed her purse to the daughter through the metal detector, and this was not noticed by anyone. Just before closing time, the daughter left, and the mother remained. She proceeded to the psychiatric ward, which is primarily designed to ensure the safety and security of patients. She hung her coat on a hook and donned a starched white lab coat, carrying a clipboard and a sample tray. She then proceeded to the sleeping nurse's station, where she found the key she was seeking. She proceeded to enter Robert's room, where she remained for an extended period of time. It appeared to her that it was a considerable length of time, though it was not possible to ascertain the exact duration. As the effects of the medication began to dissipate, Robert became conscious. He was staring intently at her, and she realized that she must have dozed off. She inquired as to why he was there, stating that he had been instructed to come. Robert responded, "I am your wife." "Robert, you informed me of your intentions and gave me instructions." He observed her extracting a firearm from her pocket. He was aware of her desire to end her life, as well as his own. They had previously enjoyed a fulfilling life together, and he believed that ending it in a similar manner would be fitting. He would take the initiative, and then she could follow suit. "We'll see each other on the other side," Robert observed as he regarded his wife. He perceived in her the young woman he had wed and all the pleasant memories they had shared. She had her own plan, but he had his own as well. It seemed as though Robert was viewing her for the first time, and she felt a profound sense of uncertainty. "Give me the gun, check the hallway," she requested. She gave him the gun and proceeded to exit the hallway. Despite her initial expectations, she did not experience a sense of urgency or distress. Instead, she found herself contemplating the potential consequences of her actions. Could she end her life? Could she, in fact, successfully pull the trigger? While this seemed like a viable plan, she was not entirely convinced. She was, in fact, attempting to escape from her own life. She hoped that after death, if not, she would at least share her husband's fate in their joint decision to bring about their demise. There was a sense of dignity in this, and she was able to accept it. She listened intently after the next round, and she knew she had to do it. It was her duty to join her husband. Her throat tightened. However, she was capable of carrying out the act and felt compelled to see it through. She believed that this was the only way to rectify the pain and suffering she had caused. She closed her eyes and uttered a brief prayer, hoping that she and Robert would be reunited in perpetuity. "Let's do this," she said, sitting on the bed. She had not felt this way since. She had been close to Robert since that night, and this proximity made her nervous. However, it made sense that the gun would fall where Robert could reach it. She took the gun and thought that it would be colder. She shouldn't hesitate. She thought, placing the barrel to her temple, and mouthed, "I'm sorry to my husband." She pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. She proceeded to pull the trigger repeatedly, yet nothing happened. She then realized that something was amiss. Despite her intentions to free Robert and be with him, the gun did not function as intended. She gazed upwards, her hand still occupied with her unsuccessful attempt at being a wife. Her eyes filled with tears, reflecting the immense disappointment and anguish she felt. She had taken such a significant risk, with so many potential outcomes. Wrong. Robert shuddered even as he left that night. Robert knew, and would utilize all available resources to locate him. She would have mobilized her entire staff, enlisting the assistance of numerous professionals and offering incentives to newspaper employees to report on him. She reassured herself that her objective was merely to locate her husband, when in fact, her actions belied a deeper motive. She attempted to exert control over him initially, then locate him, and finally, assuage his distress with a combination of love and guilt. She would gently persuade him to return from the verge of self-destruction and allow circumstances to resume their previous state. It was possible that Robert could reconcile with his wife, but he would never tolerate her infidelity or her pursuit of new romantic interests. Ultimately, the decision rested on whether Robert would. Robert was uncertain as to whether he should marry and live with and/or die. He was aware that his wife was armed with a firearm and was prepared to take it from her and unload it when she showed it to him. However, he did not consider the potential consequences of such an action. Robert was confident that his wife would not actually go through with it. She might put the gun to her head, but he was astonished to observe that she would never pull the trigger. She would never squeeze the trigger. How could she do it with reverence? Robert regarded his wife and perceived her in a wholly novel light. He smiled and then looked at him in confusion. Robert opened his left hand to reveal the bullets. His right hand reached out to her and then took his hand. She held him close, and he held her close for a long time. It was time to go home. They lived happily ever after. It took some time, and they had to convince the medical staff that they should be allowed to leave. The question of who was at fault and who deserved more blame was irrelevant. Who cares about that? Life is short. Love is scarce. When you find true love, you should dig in and hold on. You should never give up. You should pray for reinforcements and fight to the end. Thank you for listening until the end. If you found this interesting, please subscribe. Give us a like, and leave a comment. We'll see you on the Cheating Secrets channel. The experience of love is fleeting when one discovers true love. It is essential to persevere and maintain a strong attachment, seeking assistance and striving to prevail. We express gratitude for your attention and engagement until the conclusion of this discourse. Should you find this topic engaging,